are here!
Good evening and welcome to the Watchman's Report. I'm Cody Higley, and tonight we've got a really good show for you, folks. We have a very special guest, Kim Georgeton, who is running with Casey Putsch on the Putsch Georgeton ticket for governor and lieutenant governor. So, Kim, welcome to the Watchman's Report.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
We had your other half on the ticket, Casey, on, I don't know, it's probably been a month or so. That was a really good show. So I encourage everybody to look that up on YouTube or on our Facebook page for Marion Watch and learn more about Casey. But tonight we're going to learn a whole lot about Kim Georgeton. And it's a very interesting ticket and compelling, and you can see that reaction from the grassroots conservatives across the state of Ohio, people who are sick and tired of the establishment, people who are sick and tired of the swamp, people who are sick and tired of having things dictated to them, and wanting real representation. So, Kim, how would you, I guess, summarize your campaign?
Well, it's definitely a campaign by the people, of the people, for the people, and by the people. We're not being run by any big, campaign ad agencies or anything like that. We are really powered by volunteers. And I think that's probably the biggest difference of our campaign versus the others that are out there. We know that our main competitor has $20 million with $10 million of it from one single investor out of Pennsylvania. That person is named Jeff Yes, and he's a former tech executive who also owns a bevy of businesses that break down into things like companies that rescue homesteads and commercial properties. So they come in and kind of, when a community is failing, these companies come in and actually obtain both commercial and residential properties. So I find it kind of interesting that when you pair up the background of some of these tech executives, tech billionaires, and the connections that they have, the venture capital firms that they work with, the sub companies that are underneath the companies that they work with, and then you kind of pair that up with some of the objectives that we feel are happening on the ground, like the data centers and the AI and the H-1B. And you kind of look at that as at a bird's eye view, and you look down upon it and you see, what the potential outcomes could be and what the benefits are. Like, why would somebody give him $10 million, and what is he expecting in return from that $10 million investment? It gets quite concerning. So when you compare that to our campaign, which is truly powered by the hands and feet of the people on the ground, we are not billionaires, and we don't have any single large massive donors like that. So, we're really working for you guys, and we're working for ourselves and you, all of you, to try to take back our government the way it's supposed to be. So that's like high level what the big difference is in our campaign.
I think that every Ohioan should be concerned with what the vision is by the elite, by these billionaire tech bros for our state. And you mentioned data centers, you mentioned the expansion of the H-1B visas. They've made it clear this vision of Ohio becoming the next Silicon Valley. And then, as you rightly said, just follow the money and look into the donors and who they are. And it's not just at the gubernatorial level, it's across the board. And if we look now, Kim, I don't know how much, if you've had a chance to visit the good people in the 86th district, Marion County, or parts of Marion County, Union County, that's a hot button issue right now. Are these data centers, these resource draining data centers that they're constructing all around Columbus with plans to double the number. I think the figure I saw is 100, there's 134 or 135 data centers in the state of Ohio currently. And the plan is to double that to, or more than double. I think 300 is a projection by 2030. So we're looking 4 years from now. But that may seem crazy, but who the hell heard about data centers 3, 4 years ago? It really wasn't a thing. They've sprung up overnight, right? I mean, people should be concerned about this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
So-
truly terrifying and shocking, when you understand what they're going to be used for. And, I have about a 30-year career in the software consulting industry. And, one of the reasons H1B is super sensitive for me is I was laid off from my job in April of 2024 due to a large global Indian-based company that came in and bought the small boutique American-based firm that I was working for. And they slowly but surely replaced every single worker. They finally got to the management a little bit later, so it took them a few years to get down to me. But yeah, they eventually replaced every single one of us with either one of their Indian nationals in the United States, or they offshored the jobs to India directly to do the work. And that particular firm was focused around Salesforce consulting. So the Salesforce platform, rolling out Salesforce technologies. And, this is something that I have seen in my career really accelerate over the past 15 years. A lot of these Indian companies were smaller back, 15 years ago, but have just continued to grow at a scale and a pace that I was shocking to me as I was watching it happen in the industry. And then, of course, when I lost my job, finally, it was, then a really difficult time to find a replacement job. So I was unemployed for like 8 months after that. And, the whole industry and a lot of people who were impacted were also unemployed. And so when you extrapolate that out and you see what the impact is to, my particular job, I was a remote worker and our headquarters was in a different state. So, that wouldn't even actually show up on the Ohio numbers, but I live in Ohio and I'm from Ohio. And, the actual labor and then the extended loss of like my spending habits changed, so when you think about how that impacts the whole economy of Ohio, it's not just Ohio-based companies, it's national in terms of what's happening there. So, but data centers, the fact that they have been just coming into Ohio under the cover of night, literally, because what we were found down here in my area, the small bedroom village of Mount Orab in Brown County, which is completely rural. Their village council signed NDAs, so non-disclosure agreements, with the data center companies. And they were moving forward behind the scenes with absolutely zero involvement from the citizens. And, these citizens moved to Brown County to specifically be away from technology. They're looking, they have, acreage and, they like living in the country. They don't want these enormous facilities in their neighborhood. That's just kind of from a generalized statement. But then when you go a little bit deeper and understand all of the different sort of issues around data centers, environmental, ecological, they don't really bring jobs. they ruin the water, your utility bills are going to increase. There's so
Big
many
time.
reasons to absolutely say no. And then, our team is concerned about some of the deals that might have happened at the governor level, for example, with some of these data centers, because we believe there were tax abatements and tax incentives promised to some of these larger organizations at the governor level. And then, then furthermore, we find out that the governor's office has assigned counsel to, the little village. So they send down an attorney to represent the village council, so it's turning into quite an ugly situation. And it sounds like you guys have them in your area. That's one example in Brown County. We've got examples here as well in Clinton County, Butler County, Warren County. It's Scioto County. I know they've got one going on. Pike County, Highland County, Pickaway County. It's almost like which county doesn't have a data center proposed? And then, so when you start to think about, well, what are they doing at the data center? They're using data, they're gathering data, they're analyzing data. And then what are they doing with that data? Are they providing it to someone? Do they sell it? Is our government going to have access to that data? How does that impact our Fourth Amendment right to protect our papers and to protect our privacy? And then, obviously they will be combining like CBDC, central bank digital currency, along with, your medical records, your insurance records, your credit card statements, your Facebook and your YouTube likes, the friends that you're friends with on those platforms, creating an entire social profile about you. Even your electric bills will be contained within like this digital profile, for example. So, and then if you rewind 5 years to when COVID happened, and they literally wanted to shut everybody down, and you tried to go to the grocery store with no mask on, and you had to fight your way in. Now, in the future, if you go in, in that, let's say fast forward, 5 years from now, they do another COVID. Well, they actually have the capability then with all of the data centers implemented to actually shut you out of the store and to actually shut your bank account off if you don't do what they say, if you don't comply. And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely did not comply during that time frame. So, I don't like that we're being put in a position to literally enslave ourselves. I do not comply with that. I do not agree with that. And I will fight as hard as I can in whatever area I'm in to prevent that from happening.
You got to take a stand. Tyranny prevails when good men and women do nothing. And this is something that should be very, very concerning. Again, these things have sprung up overnight, it seems.
Yeah.
And now it's just finally getting the attention of the people. And there has been no planning, no long-term studies as far as environmental impact, no long-term studies for long-term economic impact, health impact. And there's clearly a huge agenda behind this, well-funded, that is pushing this agenda forward. So if that's not cause for concern, Kim, I don't know what is. But we either have people in government, elected officials who represent us, or we may as well get rid of this facade of representative democracy that we allegedly have and just admit that we live in a tyranny.
Right. Well, I often talk about how, we act in Ohio like we have Republicans and Democrats. But the Democrats are kind of in a whole category to themselves with the social narratives that they have aligned themselves with, the insanity with that. The Republicans, on the other hand, they're There's nothing about them that represents small government. There's nothing about them that represents lower taxes. There's nothing about them that represents individual sovereignty. And those are like the three keystones of what Republicans are supposed to represent. So, you know, I have renamed the Republican Party the corporate technocrats because they are funding corporations at the expense of the people. They're taxing us more. They're taking away our sovereignty, and, you know, creating policies that help the corporations grow, accelerate, and succeed, again, at the expense of individuals. So it's not a Republican Party. The people that continue to vote in the Republican Party and support the Republican Party continue to sort of assuage themselves or make themselves feel better, thinking like, I'm voting Republican and it's the lesser of two evils, so I have to vote Republican. And we keep going deeper and deeper into this hole, this corporate technocracy that we're in. And then everybody is like, yay, let's endorse these people because they're Republicans. But yet DeWine is the one that locked us down. You know, we're saying Amy Acton locked us down, which she did. She was the recommender. But, you know, Ramaswamy was also on that same panel. He was one of the advisors during the COVID scam. Like he was appointed by Governor DeWine to sit on that panel. So together, in fact, he was the one who suggested that we needed vaccine passports to go back to work. And he even offered that his tech bros could build some type of, you know, technology digital tracking system to check and see if people had vaccines or not so they could go back to work. So there's actually a podcast of him talking about that. And this is when he was sitting on that panel with Amy Acton. So, and then DeWine was the one who signed the orders to shut down the businesses, shut down the churches, and shut down the schools. Like my husband owned a restaurant during that time, and we got the letter and it was signed by DeWine. So the fallacy of the GOP putting out like, oh, don't vote for like lockdown Amy. Like we actually have locked down DeWine right now, and we've had him for, you know, 8 years. So like, how does that make any sense? If you just logically break down that argument, you see that we don't have like this facade of Republicans versus Democrats. It doesn't exist. And, you know, I myself am in the Republican Party. I'm a Central Committee member. So, but when you start to talk to your fellow Republicans about it, they get, you know, just nervous, or it starts to break down this like mass formation thinking that they had about, well, I'm proud, I'm a Republican, I've always been a Republican, I have to vote Republican. But then when you point out like what has happened to us these past 5 years or 8 years, we've gone from $50 billion in spending to $100 billion in spending. Again, like lower taxes, small government. No, like that's not that. Like what? That's not that. So
it's not.
Yeah.
It's not at all.
So, you know, so I just kind of like look around and I'm saying like, how can you be proud of this? Like, how are we proud of this right now? How can we be proud to vote and to endorse these people who put us in this situation? So yeah, I didn't mean to really get off on that rant, but I think
no, that was an excellent rant, Kim. There were lots of red pills in there that need to be digested by everyone in the audience. And I don't know if you're a fan of the movie The Matrix, but you were just dropping red pills left and right, everybody out there. And I don't even know where to start. Robert, out of all that, what struck you, buddy? And Kim and audience, I did a horrible job the first time. I think we had introduced everybody before the show started when Kim joined us. We got our man Robert Landon here as well, of course, and Jason Foreman running the board. So, Robert, out of all that, what kind of touched you?
No, I can really hear the passion coming from Kim. I think you've really taken the time to study these issues and try to understand them. What do you think, though, is like the solution? Because I've seen a lot of things, it's like just moratorium is what it seems like, is like, okay, just put a moratorium on there. But I just feel like these things are going to be beating at our door year after year. And so we might be able to put a moratorium on it for a year or 2 years, but then what are we going to do after that? Because these are very powerful interests. Obviously, these are people that are globally connected. Honestly, how do we fight back? What's the solution there?
Yeah, I mean, so in the Constitution, states have sovereignty. States, we can exercise, the amendment that gives us the right, like anything that's not precisely written down in our Constitution as something that the federal government is responsible for, the states are supposed to own. So we can invoke that amendment, but we've taken, I think DeWine has probably already taken federal dollars for, because when Trump passed the big beautiful bill, there were funding for these AI projects. So he wanted, in that big beautiful bill, there was unregulated AI for 10 years in that bill. And then they earmarked all of this money to help expand these data centers. So, and that, the big beautiful bill, which is like this thick of papers, so I don't know what the status is with regard to how much money DeWine has taken or has been earmarked for the state of Ohio. And I don't know how much of that, because these data centers started, I think, in 2022, actually. Like the Meta one, there's a Meta one and a Google one, like right in the Columbus area there. So I don't know if there were federal dollars applied to that. I don't know the details of it, but I think we have to unwind like how much federal funding we received and then how much state funding has been given out of our tax dollars towards this, because many of those companies have been given big tax abatements and tax incentives, and that's foregone revenue that we would have had, like had these companies come to us and requested to do business with us, and had we had business savvy to actually make money for Ohio instead of becoming a technocracy, we would have negotiated better deals with those companies to actually, make them pay. And so that we would have additional revenue. And I know we've gotten, a couple $2 billion worth of revenues since we instituted those, but we should have more, and those kinds of like revenue generators could be the kinds of things that could compensate for abolishing property taxes, as an example. So we've courted a lot of these companies in, and I also have concerns about how the Intel deal was negotiated too, because that was also happening. That was something that's been happening under DeWine's leadership, courting Intel, and I think Intel is supposed to come in 2030, but that deal has already been negotiated. So it's really important that we get people in office who can renegotiate those deals. I don't think. And then, like I said, when you tie this back to our counterparts who are running, they have relationships with the tech bro companies. So are they really going to be incentivized to go back and renegotiate those deals and slap Intel with more, or slap them or remove whatever things that they have put in place? I don't know what the terms were. Again, like if we can even, I don't know what power or capability we have, but we need to look at that. And citizens can do Freedom of Information Act requests to try to get ahead of this. Like, I think one thing that often happens in politics is, like, even with Trump, like we all, we campaigned for him, we made calls for him, we knocked doors for him, we went to the polls and passed out literature. I had my signs, and we did a lot, and then we thought, okay, he's going to solve everything for us, and so, let's take a break now and sit back because, he's in office and everything's going to be fine. But at the end of the day, that's not how it works. And we collectively, as a citizenry, it's our responsibility to continue to push and continue to like demand answers from our government at all levels. Like, even when Casey and I step in office on day one, that doesn't mean that you guys sit back and wait for us to fix everything. It means that, we provide more transparency and we involve, citizen committees to help define and figure out the path forward with everything, because I feel like I feel like it's not in our favor, and we have to figure out how to unwind these things, and it's going to take a lot of work to do. But I think that's where we have a call to action to the citizenry to be more involved, to get more involved, to take back your power. The way that the org chart is written in government is the citizens are at the top and the government is supposed to be at the bottom, but that's completely flipped right now. Everything is coming from the top down to us, and we're like waiting for our scraps to fall, and that's not how it's supposed to be. So like, I have a call to action for a lot of the young people. I'm not sure what your guys' ages are, but I think the young people are starting to get that soul burn, to like, we have to do something, we have to get involved. And then they're kind of looking around like, well, what is it that I should do? Like, where do I start? Because the problems are so large. And it starts with knowledge at the beginning. You have to get informed, and that takes time, but it's going to be required.
The problem is, and I'm going to follow up with a question. The problem with that is we have no institutions. We have no cultural influencers for the most part, with a few exceptions. If you want to talk about Rumble or some type of podcast or something like that.
True. You got True Social out there.
Yeah, True Social. So if you get these kids who haven't been dumbed down to the point that they can actually analyze critically, and that's a very select few, I think, personally, at this point. The influences that they're going to get are going to be communist, they're going to be leftist, they're going to be degenerate, they're going to be whatever. And they go off and get propagandized further in higher education. And I know that education is kind of seems like one of your big causes was the indoctrination that occurs in public education. So let's talk a little bit. Let's learn a little bit more. There's so many platform topics, and there's so many current issues. This show could go on and on and on and on. I want to give our viewers an opportunity to learn who you are as a person. Who is Kim Georgeton? Because when it comes down to it, a lot of these politicians, they don't know. People don't know shit about them. They don't know anything. They're just going off of maybe a campaign ad that they see, or a sign that they see in a yard, or they like the person's name when they go to the ballot. So tell us about that issue and why it was important to you and how you got involved. And then I'd also like to know, aside from just general bio stuff, like where you were born, growing up, all that good stuff, professional career. I'd also like to learn a little bit more specifically about your political awakening. Now, I think everybody that talks using red-pilled terminology has a story. I have a story, but I want to hear your story about that. So that's a lot, but hack away at it, Kim.
Okay. Well, cool. So I can start with just my background, my bio. So I was born in Cincinnati and grew up on the west side of Cincinnati. And I'm the youngest of 7. My father was a World War II Marine. So I was being the youngest in the family, and we had like kind of many years in between each child. Growing up with parents that lived during the Great Depression. So for me, I kind of grew up like a baby boomer, but I was in the Gen X age range. So I guess a lot of people have always said I'm kind of an older soul from that standpoint because of the way that I was, the values and things that I grew up with for that reason. But yeah, I went to Oak Hills High School, and then after that, I went to University of Cincinnati. So I'm a Bearcat. I was both in the Arts and Sciences College as well as the Lindner College of Business. So I had a degree in Spanish Studies and a degree in International Business from the Lindner College of Business. And I did the co-op program there. So that was pretty awesome. And then my first job out of college was at P&G, like a lot of people who live in Cincinnati. And from there, I actually went to Seattle. I was offered a job at Amazon back in 1998. So at the time, they were a legitimate startup. They only had the books. They were only selling books online. And my job was to start a gift center for them. So we sold all kinds of different little products back in 1998. We sold video games, toys, games, leather goods, little gifts, things like that. It was all for a Christmas gift center. And out of that was the rollout plan for all of the different hard lines that Amazon then brought on. So then soon after they launched music, and the first hard lines product goods that we launched was consumer electronics. And then we went into video games and toys and games. So anyway, that was kind of my first experience with technology and learning technology. And from there, when 9/11 happened, I lived in Germany at the time because I was helping Amazon launch their electronics department over in Germany. And being over there and watching the Twin Towers fall and the plane run into the second building and everything happen was just a pivotal moment for me. And at the time, my father he had a stroke, and I just made the decision I was moving back to Cincinnati. So like I left and moved back to Cincinnati shortly after. So that was kind of my first aha moment, like what's going on in the world. Because at the time I was young, I was in my 20s, and it's like the world was my oyster, and I was already doing a lot of fun things in my career. But I made the decision to move back and be with my family, and I'm really glad I did that because I was able to be around when my father passed away, and I helped my mom, with him and everything like that when he was not well. So yeah, from there I just have been involved.
What were your parents politically? I mean, what kind of household were you raised in? You had seven of you, so they probably, I'm guessing, were religious.
Yes, we grew up Roman Catholic, so I can tell you all the prayers in Latin. So I can sing you the Pater Noster, our Father, if you'd like. But yeah, we grew up, literally going to almost like the Tridentine Latin Mass, very, very strict, very formal Catholic Mass. And but I would say, like we were a family that had JFK's picture hanging in our family room, growing up on our paneled walls. Catholic. Democrat Catholic at the time, yeah. But it was mostly about pro-life. So and that was John F. Kennedy was pro-life. Like he would be a Republican today if you looked at his policies. He would actually be a better Republican today than any of the Republicans that we're seeing. So but it was definitely a household where we had political discussions around the kitchen table every Sunday for dinner. And we would get heated, we would argue, and we would have like really good conversations about what was going on in the world. And so there was that. But again, I would never have called myself political at that time at all. I was just kind of in the whole like, let's do this thing, let's have a career, let's see who we're dating, like let's see how this family thing works out. And so anyway, that was kind of my youth experience. And then my work just continued into like the e-commerce marketing and technology sides of the business. And then I ended up just kind of that morphed into consulting. So that's why I kind of wrap up my whole career. And I've just basically been in consulting for, almost 30 years now. So, yeah.
So
And like I said,
when you say that you were living in Germany and 9/11 happens, that kind of touched you like it did so many people
yeah,
that lived through it. But, and you were politically, I guess, agnostic, it sounds like, raised in a Democrat household, but a Kennedy, so not the evil Democrats of today.
it was a pro-life
what-
household. That was, the main thing was a pro-life household. Like we were always doing, pro-life.
So what got
activities.
you, what, in the more recent period of your life,
Yeah.
what got you, what motivated you to get involved and to look toward conservative principles
Yeah. So,
in your
yeah.
political journey?
Yeah. So I think somewhere along the line, I grew up in the, 80s, 90s. And I think, just looking back, it was unfortunately something shifted in the culture and people were not involved in politics very much during that time frame. In fact, it was kind of looked down upon to, be involved in a large way. So, so yeah, I would say I just wasn't involved. I wasn't informed. I just, I guess you could say I was somewhat apathetic. I just didn't know. I had no knowledge of it. And really what woke me up, we would go and vote like many people, like 80% of Ohioans, they mostly vote in general elections. Like 80% of Ohioans don't know that there are primaries, like legitimately. So is that by design? Like, did the political parties, when they grew up and they created all of these laws and these political clubs and because they're actually clubs, the political parties are not, they're not nonprofits. They're not actually part of any kind of government agency. It's actually technically a club. So if you, I don't know if you know that or not, but our political parties are considered clubs. They're private, so you can't FOIA them. So like if you want to do a Freedom of Information Act on our GOP, you can't because it's technically a private club. So, and their communications aren't privy to public knowledge. So that's why you cannot do you can do a Freedom of Information Act on any government institution, but you cannot do it to the Democrat or the Republican Party or Libertarian or whatever other ones exist. So because the way they're set up. And that also gets into like it kind of veers off into a little lane of you can't really sue them either. If you claim that they do something that bothers you, you can't really sue them because they're a private club. So they actually can discriminate against you almost legally for that reason because of the way they're classified. Technically it's not legal, I guess, but you would have a hard time proving something like that in court because you are a member or you're not a member of that group. So what really got me involved was COVID. So when COVID hit, my daughter was in 9th grade and they were trying to make her wear a mask at school and they were starting to talk about vaccines. They shut my husband's restaurant down during COVID, and that really upset our family. And so at that time, I looked up and I was like, how in the world did we get here? Like I thought that the political people that we were putting in office were, doing their jobs. Like we hire them to do a job. I thought they were doing the job that we, hired them for. So, it was really at that point that I had to learn the whole infrastructure of what these political parties were, what they were doing. And, I always voted usually Republican, just because those were the candidates that I aligned with more. But I didn't really know how these parties were structured. So after looking into it, I found out like where we lived, in the community that we lived in northern Cincinnati area, the representative that we had was a Democrat. And I sent her an email and I said, they're trying to make us my daughter wear masks at school and vaccines, and I don't agree with this. Like, can you help me? So basically, like, I sent her a plea thinking that she would help me because she's supposed to be my representative. And when she responded and said, oh, well, I have a child, and if any child was sitting next to my child in school and wasn't vaccinated, I would be very upset. And that was kind of her response back to me. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know, like, how you come up with that kind of an argument, because I have this thing called personal sovereignty, and I make my own decisions, and I have, individual liberty, and you're violating that by trying to make me do something you want me to do. So we kind of got into a little email back and forth with that. And then I realized we're in serious trouble, because these people have they have no respect for the Constitution. So, and luckily I had good history class or whatever. And I've always enjoyed learning about the Constitution. So I had that background. And so when I found out she was my representative, and I reached out to the head of our GOP and I said, hey, how did she get elected to be our representative? And how can I challenge her next time? Because like, I don't like this person. Like they are not making good decisions on behalf of humanity, and they're violating the Constitution. So that took me down a whole path of getting involved in the Republican Party and trying to understand how it was set up, how you run for an office, the paperwork you have to fill out, the people that you have to meet and talk with, the whole thing. So that kind of led me down that whole path. And that's really the impetus of why I got involved. I mean, I almost sued my daughter's school over the mask situation. I set up, different organizations. I set up an organization called Free Our Children at that time. I held protests. I had a big protest at the health department back then. And I taught myself how to write affidavits, lawful affidavits. And I wrote 12-page affidavits to the health department, basically demanding that they stop claiming that masks work, and that they stop promoting the vaccine as safe and effective, because I had all of the research. I had done all of the research, and I had all of the evidence in these affidavits proving that they weren't safe and effective, and that masks don't work, and all the reasons why they don't work, the micron size of the virus, et cetera, the whole thing. So I had all these affidavits, and I organized a big protest at the health department, slapped all the affidavits down on the board members' desks and said, I demand that you stop marketing this stuff right now, because they were like slamming marketing, like, get your vaccine here, like, oh man, buy your masks here, these are great. They were slamming all this marketing out at people, like all over the place, mainly on social media. And so in the area that I lived in, there was a family who their daughter was part of the vaccine trial, and she was severely injured. Her name is Maddie DeGaray. I don't know if you've heard of her or not, but that family, she was immediately severely vaccine injured, so much so that she was wheelchair bound, and she still is today. But if you ever saw any of the Ron, what's his name? Not Ron Paul, the senator from Wisconsin.
Thomas Massey.
No, not Thomas Massey. His name is just escaping my mind. But anyway, there was Ron Johnson. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If you ever saw like the panels that he held during COVID and everything, like that family was always like in those panel discussions, and they were interviewing Maddie's mom during that, because they could get no compensation for their daughter. Like there was no vaccine injury compensation program. Like they were really put through the ringer on that. And so anyway,
at that experimental forever.
Yeah. So at that protest, I took a picture of her. I held it up in the meeting, and I was like telling these board members, like, they need to stop. Like the things that they're promoting are basically lies, is what I was saying to the community. And it was an interesting experience, because when we went there, they had their police officers out. We were dressed in I had on a suit, and I was dressed nice. It wasn't like I was going there dressed like an Antifa member, but they had their police officers out in front of the building, and they were looking at us like we were going to cause a problem. And here we are with our protest signs and, you know, our affidavits, and like we were all signed up to speak. There were about 50 people, I guess, that showed up there. But anyway, that's kind of the impetus of when I learned our government was not doing the job we hired them to do. And I just took action. So I call myself an accidental activist because it just needed to be done and nobody was doing it. And so I just took charge and started doing it. And that's how I
I'll
ended
tell you,
up.
as far as a motivating factor or an origin story, to borrow a phrase from like a superhuman anthology, I think the madness that was on display everywhere during that whole COVID era, if you did not get red pilled during that, if it did not light a fire in your heart and spark some thought in your brain for truth, then nothing will. I think that the people that went along as sheep to the slaughter, they're unfortunately largely hopeless, because going through that, it just amazed me. It amazed me, the reaction and how much that big government got away with, and these big corporations like Ohio Health and places like that we've seen this consolidation of the healthcare system in the state of Ohio,
Yeah.
too. I don't know. It just it was shocking to me. So I think that's one heck of an origin story as to why you started getting involved. And you ran for state rep, right? Is that correct, for your district?
That was in 2022. Yeah. And
Well, what
was
was your
interest-
experience with that? So you're a political outsider, or you get involved with the Republican Party because you want to advocate against the injustice that was the police state, essentially,
yeah.
and medical tyranny during COVID. So tell us your takeaways from that experience, trying to work within the Republican Party.
Oh, it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. I was thinking, you know, knowing the Constitution and how our founders set up the process, the civic process, I was thinking, oh gosh, you know, they'll be happy to have a new person get involved. So naively, I called the head of our party, the head of the Hamilton County Republican Party, who at the time was Alex Trianafilu, who is now the head of the Ohio Republican Party. And, you know, he basically said, well, here's the situation with that district. You know, we had so-and-so, this guy, Chris Monzel, ran last election cycle and he lost to this woman. And I said, okay, well, let's take an analytical approach to this. Like, how do I get voter data on that election cycle? So because of my consulting background, I'm always like, okay, well, let's start with some data and let's see what we have here. So when I looked at the votes, like, he didn't lose by a big margin. And then I started talking to some political consultants who said this particular area that we were in, which is more of a suburban area, and a lot of times women vote for women in those suburban areas, just because if they see, they just go into the poll, like 80% of people go into the poll and they don't know the candidates, because by and large, for the most part, people are not informed. So they go into the general election and they look and they're like, okay, I see this person named Chris and I see this person named Jessica. Like, who am I going to pick? And there is a margin for women between 5 and 8% of a lift for women anytime there's a woman and a man on a ballot in a suburban neighborhood like that.
The
And
whole
so,
"I am woman, hear me roar" type shit, right, Kim?
well, not that at all, but you know, but when I learned that there was this analytical lift that was proven by the numbers I was looking at, I was like, okay, that's what made me decide to run. I was like, well, this is, he lost by that margin. And I was like, well, if we just replace the next person who runs with a female, we should be able to at least have a better chance there. Like this is how my brain works. So of course I go into the party and I explain, like, this is what I'm going to do. I think I can win this because here's this margin. And so I meet with the guy, Chris, who had run the prior year, and because they advised me, go meet with him, see what his experience was, see what you can learn. So we went to Skyline and had lunch, and we talked about, okay, well, tell me about the challenges in this district. And at the end of the lunch, I said, I was like, well, I'm going to run for this because, I think I can win. And I was like, are you going to run? And he was like, all like real secretive with me. Like he wouldn't give me a straight answer. And I was like, okay, well, see ya, I'm out. Like I'm out. So I left the luncheon thinking that, I was going to run. So then I started to figure out, okay, how do I pull a team together? And by that time I already had so many volunteers from the grassroots engagement that I had done with the protesting and everything, that I had all these volunteers come out of the woodwork, and they were like, okay, I'll be your campaign manager. We'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do that. So I had all these people. It was great. And we put a plan and a great team together. And so when the night before the signatures were due, there was a meeting in one of the Republican clubs, and I was gathering some signatures. And all of a sudden, the guy, Chris, shows up with his little clipboard and his paper, and he's getting signatures. And another lady named Jill shows up with her clipboard and getting her signature. So all of a sudden, I was the only one in the race, and these two, like, I'll call them establishment Republicans, showed up with their papers getting signatures because they knew that I was going to run. So they were together going to challenge me. And their thinking was, first, this Chris guy was wanting that position because he had been a commissioner in the city. And you'll learn this if you don't know this already, but people in government positions, if they serve a certain number of years, they get a lifetime pension when they retire from the state of Ohio. So he was working on trying to fulfill his number of years of service so that he could get his pension. And that's what was at stake for him, which I didn't know at the time. But this is why he was so adamant about trying to beat me out of the primary. And so then they had convinced this other woman, like, okay, well, let's have two women and the man in the primary, and for sure then Chris will win. Well, as soon as I started campaigning, they started seeing how many people I had. They told her to step back because they realized that it was going to split the vote and he would have a better chance going head to head on against me. So anyway, from day one, I won't go into all the details, but from day one until the day of the election, there were so many like cheap shots that they took at me. They did an early endorsement when they normally didn't do endorsements. They weren't going to invite me to speak. When they did invite me to speak, the microphone wasn't working. He brought pens to the polling locations, and he was basically passing out his literature through these pens, which you're not allowed to have literature in the polling locations, but he got away with it because he gave everybody a pen, and then the pens were all over the polling locations. I mean, from one thing to the next, it was like a complete and utter setup, basically, like as shady as you can get. So, but I still got 41% of the vote at the end of the day. I lost, but I got like 41% of the vote. And I felt like, wow, we took on the establishment. I didn't know that there was this thing called the establishment at the time. I was naive and I was just running out of the goodness of my heart. But yeah, so we definitely made a dent in that. And, even at the beginning of me running, like multiple people would call me and tell me like, you don't want to run for this. Like you should back out. Or like even the chairman, when he went to my husband's restaurant and he was like, oh, why is your wife running? You should tell her to drop out. We'll find something for her to do in the government if she really wants to be involved. So it was this constant like bullying activity, like around like just stay out of our party, like don't come near us and we'll leave you alone kind of thing. That was the essence of that experience.
That's a familiar story, Kim. I mean, if you talk to grassroots, challengers or people who say, I want to get involved. I have a desire to see this change or to implement this policy, and then they get involved. I don't know how many times I've heard the exact same story that you just relayed, almost to the T.
Yeah, they have a little playbook that they use. So
And again, that should be like super concerning to everybody.
should
But the
be.
problem is, most people are completely ignorant. They're completely naive to party politics or the reality on the ground, who these people are, where the money that funds these people comes from. Um, it's just a nightmare scenario for the people of the state of Ohio and the United States of America. But it's reality.
Yeah, it is.
So
And I can't fault anyone for it, because prior to that, I was unaware. I was ignorant of what that process was like until I like got into it. And then I was like, whoa, this is way different than I expected. So, we've got 80% of our civilians are out there like that right now, today, still. Because when you look at people who go out to vote in primaries, it's usually less than 20% go out and vote in a primary. So that means 80% of our real, constituents, 80% of Ohioans are sitting out at the primary. They don't know it exists. They don't know that they can be involved. And, I think they keep it that way on purpose. The parties keep it quiet because, they don't want people to mess up or mess in their little clubs that they have going on. So
they definitely have a club, don't they, Robert?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we see as an establishment and a swamp, even here locally. What would you say to people who aspire to get involved? What is your advice to people who would want to get into politics for the first time, or even just activism? Do you have any kind of tips or advice for them?
I would say just you have to go in expecting barricades, expecting to have to push through barricades. You have to go in with that mindset, and don't give up. And reach out to people like myself or like anybody else who has gone through it for advice. So yeah, I mean, I think it also takes obviously an investment. So depending upon which position you want to run for, I'd say, run for those central committee seats. Those you don't have to have funding for typically, unless you're in like maybe Franklin, Hamilton, or one of the more controlled counties. But, usually get on the central committee seats, try to take over the central committee, groups as much as you can to get involved. And I know that's also very frustrating for a lot of people too, because when you come in, you're usually the minority, because there's like the pack that goes around and they vote together, they stick together, and then they're not as inviting usually. But I just say don't give up and keep going. I mean, at some point, the Heritage Foundation, I don't know if you guys do follow the Heritage Foundation or anything, but yeah, so they came out with an analysis. I think it was a couple of years ago, and they had like a future projection of what was going to be happening in politics, just generally across the country, and like the Gen Z and millennials and whatnot. I don't know what generation you guys are in. I think you guys might be in one of those, but
I'm the greatest generation, Kim. At least my spirit is maybe that. But
awesome. Well, you're both the greatest generation. But the point is, the younger generations are getting tired of this Republican Democrat thing, and they want independence to run. Basically, is like the message of the Heritage Foundation when they did this analysis. So they were projecting out, like, at some point we're going to hit this tipping point where the younger people of today are going to reject either this Republican or Democrat thing, and they're going to adopt a new party or begin to run as independents. And there will be a point in time where that supersedes the Republican and Democrat groups. So I would say get in there and run with whatever party, with your Republican Party now. Get in there and run to get experience. You have to have experience at doing this because there's an art and a science to it for sure. And there's a willpower to it. So like, it's important to get in there and run to get experience. But then at some point when it's ready to flip from the Republican and Democrat to like, maybe there's these other parties that are going to emerge. I don't know. Like there's a constitutional party, there's a patriot party, there's a Restore America party, there's an America First party. There's all these parties that are kind of bubbling up or getting ready to emerge. And I think that, in order to prepare for that, you should get experience doing it now. Makes
How many
sense?
politicians do you think are like real people? Like not completely fake SOBs in your assessment?
Like sitting elected officials right now?
Yeah.
I would say
You
maybe
gotta
about
give a
10%.
percentage.
10%.
You think
10 to
10?
15.
You think that high? That's very generous, Kim. I
That
mean,
is generous. Yeah.
I can probably count on one hand how many genuine politicians I think there are, but you have more experience in it, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
There are a lot of people who generally go in, I think, and I think most people do go in with genuine intentions, but once they get into the structure of it, it's so overwhelming and then they, for one reason or another, I don't know what it is, they turn like at some point, and you can see it happen. Like, you can definitely see it happen.
And then they end up as millionaires when they came in with like hardly anything in their bank accounts.
Yeah, at the congressional level.
How that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just magically appears like, you get elected and then, oh, well, you're going to end your career as a millionaire.
Okay, so at the congressional level, I would agree with you. I think it's maybe like 1% or 2%, but I was talking on the Ohio State elected official level. That's the 10% number that I was giving you.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know. It's a mess. It's a mess, and we have to do something. You talk about that famous quote of Barack Hussein Obama that the goal is to fundamentally change this country. And we need that type of messaging. It's the Make America Great Again, but it needs to be more proactive. I mean, we need fundamental change. That's just like when you talk about the issues of axing the tax and reform of income tax and all this stuff. We need fundamental change. It's not just some little bit of, careful slicing with a surgical knife that the Republican Party is doing right now. Yeah, we need a hatchet. We need a chainsaw, but we have to do it intelligently, but we're going to have to look at the entire system. Spending, waste, fraud, abuse, everything, fundamental change. And that's got to be the messaging. Would you agree with that, or am I off course?
No, I think you're right. I think it's more about a rollback. I would say it's a rollback because we've layered so many things on, just layers and layers and layers, constant layers on top of it. So I'm speaking to, directly for Ohio right now. The congressional level, I think, is probably in the similar case, but, like in Ohio, we've added departments, we've added spending every single year, expansion. So we need to roll back in many of these areas or nullify in certain cases, nullify things and roll back. And, people don't like hearing that. People, especially if they're already in government, they don't like hearing that because then people get fearful of their jobs or feel fearful of, the position that they have or the power that they have. So it's like, it's a huge battle because that is really what we need to do. We need to roll back and nullify things. But the people in those very institutions they will go out kicking and screaming because they don't want that. They don't want to cut their own jobs. It's like
They're
when you
government
vote in this.
parasites. They're living off us.
Yeah.
And you have to end the age of big government. This
Yeah.
was not the historical precedent in this country or in this state. It
No.
is 50, 60 years old at best.
Yeah.
And the era is over. Now, whether or not people want to admit it, whether or not they're clinging on for dear life as they die, on the table, it's over. It's not sustainable, and it
No.
needs to end yesterday. So I don't know.
I mean, back in the, like, when they created Congress, the congressional people used to get 1 day's wages. They had to get on their horse and ride their horse to the meeting, and they would be paid 1 day's wage just for that day. But the travel for them to get from, wherever they were coming from was on their dime. They had to get on their horse and get over to DC to have their meeting. Then they got 1 day's wage, and then they get on their horse and go back to their home. So, and travel for a few days here and there, a few days there, a few days back, but you got 1 day's wage. Today, our Congress people get a salary of, I think it's 180,000 annually. So, and they don't work full time. Like, they're not in session full time. So, and they have voted their own pay raises since the old days when they only got 1 day's wage. So the same thing has happened in the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio, the state reps, they vote their own pay raises, and they only go in session, for a week, a few times out of the year for a week at a time. So many of them have other jobs, other full-time jobs that they maintain while they're also state reps. So, again, and then they also voted themselves to have, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, to, like, when they retire, they get a full pension for the rest of their lives. And that is all of our tax dollars. And they voted that in. So what I'm saying is, like, the rollbacks of all of these things that they have done to make it, to make it where we're paying for them constant. We're paying for their everything. Well, then they just put a new bill up to pay for security. So, you saw that thing that happened with the Vex security people. They got arrested for drug dealing or whatever. Yeah. So now the state legislature put in a bill. They are proposing a bill that now we, the taxpayers, are going to pay for their security while they're campaigning. No, we're not paying for their security, especially he's a billionaire. He can go get his own security. So, I mean,
the governor, is this for all state level?
It's for the governor and the lieutenant governor candidates who are nominees. So whoever wins in the May primary, we would then be paying for their security through the general election. We already pay for security for DeWine as part of our taxes, which, go look in what we're actually paying for. Like I said, we have a $100 billion budget that they're spending our money. And then another thing they just proposed was, I don't know about you guys. Did you go on a European vacation last year?
No.
I wish.
Well, what's that?
I said I wish.
Well, our state reps, they just proposed a new bill that will send a commission of like almost 20 people to go to Europe or Eastern Europe, to Israel, and any other multilateral countries in addition to Israel to discuss
to kiss the wall.
No, they're not. Well, they'll probably do that too, but they are going to discuss business opportunities. And the only thing that this bill does is the only outcome of the bill is they do a study and they provide a report. There's literally nothing else that comes out of it. And so, but then we send this whole committee of almost 20 people, and they get to charge back all of their expenses. So airplane, hotels, meals, entertainment, we are going to pay for all of that. And they just proposed that bill while our property taxes are sky rising, while they're putting in all these data centers that we have to pay higher energy bills for. If people aren't pissed about this, I mean, they need to be really upset because these people just continue to spend our money and they're doing these little pet projects like that. Like, oh, let's just do a study and a report. It has nothing to do with legislating or creating laws. It has everything to do with a little pet project, and they get to take an awesome European trip on it. And, it's just ridiculous. It's a slap in the face to all Ohioans for them to even propose such a thing. And I know that, and they've done it before. This is not the first time. This is like a reiteration of a bill that they had previously, I think. So many of them have
That bill,
traveled.
I think that you're referring to is like titled Closer Economic Ties with Israel. Is that the one that you're referring to?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like I saw it. They voted on it, what, like 2 weeks ago, something like that.
But that's not the job. That's not their job. It has nothing to do with the state legislature. In fact, foreign relations is Congress's responsibility. So like the fact
Oh
that
no,
we're,
I agree with you
know,
100%. But
Yeah.
what my point with that is, what does that consist of? Like, we're already as a nation subsidizing Israel and have been for years. And then what is Israel number one at? Intelligence. What is Ohio becoming? It's becoming a data center hotbed or hot zone. So is this all part of that agenda? Because Israel has, Palantir and everything else, all this spy network surveillance stuff that they again are leading on the international stage. So is this all part of that? And then you bring over our representatives and they kiss the wall and then they get the blessing of Benjamin Netanyahu and his cohorts in the Knesset, financially or otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm offended. I'm offended. We have great people in Ohio. We have awesome, smart, entrepreneurial people in Ohio. And we should be spending our money developing Ohioans' ideas. We've got a great university. We've got Ohio State University. We've got University of Cincinnati. We got Wright State, Dayton, UD, Kent State. Got great universities that produce great, smart people who have great ideas. So why aren't we funding Ohioans' ideas?
They don't care about us, Kim. That's the thing. They don't care about us. It's H-1B replacement of American workers. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine that works as a laborer, construction, carpenter, that sort of thing. And he's been down on his luck, had some hard times here over the last couple of years. You know what he told me today? He told me that he's working in Columbus, on a crew in Columbus, and he's very thankful. And he said, problem is, a lot of the foreign labor, the Mexicans and illegals, aren't working in those trades. So he's actually able to get employment. And he's very talented. He's a very hard worker. And I said, good. Finally, a policy. There's that's another topic, the immigration issue and stuff, but that was all by design.
Yes.
Was the replacement of native born workers, of Americans. And then you're going to do it
That's
on a
just a
legal.
conspiracy theory.
No, it's totally not a conspiracy theory. If you look at the birth rates in
Of course.
Ohio amongst native born population, they're not anywhere near replacement levels. So when you see the Ohio Department of Development that gives population projections in the state of Ohio in 2050, where's the growth? It's in Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Dayton. And there's substantial declines pretty much everywhere else.
Right.
So what does that tell you? Are all these rural folks going to be migrating down to Columbus and Cincinnati and Dayton and whatever? They're all native born? No. You can look at the demographic change that has already occurred in those metropolitan areas for the past 30 years. It's just going to be an acceleration of that process. It's a death of the native-born Ohioan, and it's a replacement with the foreign-born Ohioan. As a
Yeah.
nation, we're already in excess. In 2020, state of Ohio, I think, was 17% roughly foreign-born. That's before DeWine imported 50,000 or 20,000 Haitians into Clark County. So we're going to see this process continue to accelerate. Don't you think? I mean, is that a concern
do.
of yours?
It's a big concern. I think, it's funny. I found in the year 2000, the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, they produced a report called the Great Replacement. And I just posted it on X a couple days ago. And because people keep saying, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, they didn't really plan this. But then if you go back and you look at that report, it literally outlines like the population decline, and they are showing data that shows there is a population decline. And they are showing that what they're trying to do is bring in other kinds of communities to account for we need a certain amount of population to continue the economy here, right? So if you don't have the population, you can't keep growing the economy. So part of that is creating policies that will entice families, to expand. Like we need to have bonuses or family bonuses for people to entice them to have more kids, basically. Like get out there and find your mate, like find your wife, find your husband, and like have an awesome family. And so if we can put policies in place to help energize that will be something that will definitely help Ohio in the future. And we have some ideas around doing that. So
We've aborted 63 million plus in this nation,
yes.
and we've imported probably 20, 30 million illegals.
Yeah.
In what nation in the history of the world murders its own and replaces it with the foreigner?
It's
This
a
is not
degeneracy.
normal.
No, it's a degeneracy. And I campaigned hard against that constitutional amendment, whenever that was, 2024. The one that allowed abortion. I was campaigning hard on that, and it was heartbreaking to go door to door and knock on doors and talk to people and see where they were on that. And I had a lot of doors slam in my face. And it's an epidemic that we have. And, a lot of it is the women who have been through these situations. Many of them that are the ones that are slamming the doors in my face have had abortions themselves. And it's a trauma. It's a trauma experience that they went through. And they obviously haven't healed through it. And it's so upsetting that they can't imagine. Again, it's that kind of mass formation where you've done something that's so morally inept, but you don't want to admit it. So you have to vote for the right to be able to do that in order to make it make sense in your mind. So that's what I saw when I knocked on doors, and it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. So there's a cultural decay that has occurred, in our generation, I'd say, where you have, it's easy to kind of see because we have a religion at the top of the pyramid, and then we have culture down from that, and then down from culture you have laws. So the laws get created based upon religion and culture. And then from the laws, then we the people are kind of underneath that, if you think of the pyramid of importance. And we've seen a decline in, people's, identifying as a particular religion. More people now are identifying as atheist than any kind of religion, or agnostic, or whatever they call that. So we've seen the decline, and it stems from that. It's a cultural issue. So that's not something you can govern out of. It's, I was having a conversation with a group of people, and they were like, there was a couple pastors there, and they stood up and they were like, this is our fault. Like, the pastors are taking, I'm not trying to blame them, but they're saying like, it's a cultural issue that we all need to understand how we got here in order to reignite the type of moral and values that America was founded on. We have to reignite that and re-embrace that as Ohioans and as a culture. If we don't, you can't govern out of it. It's just what I'm saying, because the laws are below. You've got religion, culture, and then laws, and then the people. So the people are down here, and they're just a product of all of those three things. So you can't like elect a governor and expect everything to change, because the culture needs to change. So that's the biggest issue that I think we face here in Ohio.
I agree. And it's the chickens are going to come home to roost in one way or another, whether or not it's going to be a full-fledged collapse, economic collapse, or something of this nation, just one too many IOUs issued and then paid for with monopoly money, or is it going to result in just an unrecognizable nation at every level, police state, totalitarian state, replacement of the native born population? I don't know, but we've had a cultural war that has been waged in earnest since the 1960s. Now,
Yeah.
None of us were born or lived through the 1960s that are on this particular show, but we all studied it. We should have studied it in school, and you'll hear about the revolution, the cultural revolution of the 1960s. That was more significant. As a historian, I can tell you that was much more impactful, much more significant than what you learned about
Yes.
in cause and effect. And since that time, we have been, for the most part, kind of allegedly continuing to wage the cultural war. It was a cultural revolution in the 60s, but the war went on. Our side, conservatives, nationalists, traditionalists, whatever you want to call us, we haven't conserved anything. We haven't been victorious on that cultural war front, not one time. So we have 60 years to go on, to fight back, to go on the offensive, all the
Right.
while trying to maintain stability within the system
Right.
from like an economic standpoint. So what Kim just said, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Now, Kim, with that in mind, having those conversations, are you hopeful for the, I mean, I know you gotta say that, oh, I'm hopeful we can do all stuff, but really, give me an honest answer. Are you pessimistic? Are you hopeful? And elaborate on that a little bit.
I am hopeful. I always believe that everybody's in a learning experience, and that the hope that I have comes out of people learning on a daily basis. So I'm hopeful and thankful that you guys are holding a call like this to help bring things to light. And the more people do that, the better. If you look back at one of my favorite books, Thomas Sowell wrote a book called The Vision of the Anointed, and he does a look back on all of the different policies that came out of the Cultural Revolution, such as the teaching of sex ed in schools, such as the removal of prayer back in the 70s. And he does an economic analysis of those policies and how those have impacted our culture today. And everybody back then was like, oh, we have to teach sex ed in schools so people, girls don't get pregnant. But the premise is, the more you teach sex ed, the more kids are going to have sex. So like if you look back, like that's that is what the left is always trying to do. They're trying to say, we need to teach people about X, Y, or Z. But at the end of the day, they're increasing X, Y, and Z by teaching it. So I think this comes down to families. Like, are families willing to reject digital devices in their households? Are families willing to reject starting their kids in first grade at, soccer and football, when I grew up, the kids didn't start soccer and football until they were in 8th or 9th grade. So, like, what are families willing to do to kind of protect the core values, the traditional values that we hold dear, that really create a strong culture? It's up to the families to really, like, grasp onto that. And I have hope. I have hope that people are waking up, that people are realizing this, and that they will embrace that, and that we will have a great future in Ohio.
I sure hope so. It's like the song, you got to have faith, faith, faith. You got to have faith. You're an 80s chick. You probably
Yes. George
you guys
Michael.
like
Yeah.
George Michael. Oh, yeah. All right. We want to be respectful of your time, Kim. She's one of the hardest working people in the state of Ohio. I have to believe her and Casey are hitting the pavement. They're going on podcasts. They're going on shows. They're doing all these interviews, getting the word out. I don't know how you guys do it. Just from what I see, I follow a lot of these different channels and things, and be like Casey Putsch, Kim Georgeton, Casey Putsch, just everywhere. It's everywhere. It's exploding. So want to be respectful of your time, Kim, because you've given us an hour and a half on the Watchman's Report.
Wow,
So
it went fast. Yeah.
it went fast. It was a great conversation. I do want to give our friend Robert here an opportunity for one final question, then I'm going to give you a close. But we're only going to let you off the show tonight, Kim, if you promise to come back on before
Sure.
the primary. There's so much to talk about, and it's been very intellectually stimulating, and I know the audience loves it up here in the Marion, Ohio area. So shout out to everybody in the audience. So Robert, hit us up with a question, comment for Kim.
Really, just to wrap it up, Kim, do you have any final words of inspiration to our listeners? Anything that would be encouraging to our listeners? Obviously, we're in turbulent times now. Is there anything that you would be able to say to our listeners that might encourage them tonight?
I mean, just, look around at the people that you're with and tell them that you love them, and hug them and appreciate them, and say your prayers tonight. Like, those are the core things that you can do to keep moving forward.
Amen.
Pray for a good result in the upcoming primary. That's what I'm going to pray for. Please, Lord, give us a good result. All right, Kim, closing comments for the audience here. Go right ahead.
We're all here for a time such as this.
Short but sweet.
Can't argue with
So,
that.
definitely check out, what's your campaign website?
Putschforohio.com.
Check it out, folks. So be sure to rewatch the episode of the interview with Casey Putsch, and then you have learned a hell of a lot about a whole lot of topics tonight from the next Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio, Kim Georgeton. So we thank you, Kim, for joining us on the Watchman's Report tonight. And for Robert Landon, I'm Cody Higley. And folks, remember out there, a watchman is always vigilant. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Sound the alarm! To arms! They are here!